In this video, we will talk about groups. A group is just a collection of users. A group, for example, imagine that we have a group here. A group can contain inside some users, and the groups are used for assigning the same permissions to all the users of that group. And in case that we assign the permissions to the group, it's easier to remove some users from the group or add new users, and we won't need to change all the places where we have gave permissions to that group each time we add or remove somebody from a group. So a group is a collection of users, and we have groups in Linux. And the groups are stored in another file. Is the groups file. It is a group file, and here it has a similar format than password file or shadow file. It's a column separated file, much simpler than the other two files. The format of this file is you have the name of the group here. You have a password for that group. You can have some groups can have a password, but it's not used because all the members of the group will need to share the common password. That's not a very good security practice. So groups with password are not used anymore in Linux. We have the group ID. Here, each group has an ID. This ID can be different. It's an ID, but it's not related with the user ID. And we can have here a comma-separated list of the members of that group. So for example, in this group, LP-admin is the group number 121, and it has only one member, is the user member. Okay, this is the groups. If we take a look at the password file, remember that each user, maybe with good will be better here. Okay. Remember that one of the fields that we have here in the password file is the primary group from a user. So for example, if I'm here, here we have the user Ernie. This is the user ID, and this is the primary group ID. Each user needs to have a primary group ID, and this group must be here in the group file. So for example, for Ernie, the main group will be this one. When we create a user with a user, it will create a group with the same name of the user and with the same ID. But this ID doesn't need to be the same as the user ID. We will have a different number here, for example, 1999, whatever, and it will work if it will work anyway. Okay, and that doesn't have to be the same number. And this is the primary group. It must exist here, but we can have other groups for other purpose. Okay, and how do we manipulate groups? Well, we can modify this file directly. So it will be a way of modifying the groups. Only the root user can do that. But we also have commands for modifying that file. So for example, I will put here so we can see the changes. We can use the group add order to create a new group. So for example, we can create a group Sesame Street. I can't do that, only root can do that. Okay, so I will use sudo user, and now I have a new group. Remember that each command, for example, group add has a lot of options that you can take a look at them with the man and the order name. Okay, so I've created a new group. If I take a new, okay, here we have a new group, Sesame Street, with a different number, and it has no members. Nobody belongs to that group. I can also remove a group with sudo group del, and sorry, and it will remove the group. It's only adding or removing files here in etc group. We could do this by hand too, but it's not used. Okay, we can get information with the end, for example, it's the same as listing the group. For example, get end, I will create a group again. Group at Sesame Street. End group. It will print the line, the same line of etc group, the same line of the file. Okay, but this group is empty. We need to work effectively with that group. We need to add or remove users from that group, and there are different ways of doing that. One way of doing that is using user mod. User mod command has a lot of options. We can modify the name of the user, the password ID. You have different options. For adding a user to a group, we can use the append, the append parameter, and the groups that we want to add this user. So for example, Sesame Street, and the name of the user. So for example, I want to add Ernie to Sesame Street. Okay, now I have this user in that group. If I print the file again, we can see here in the Sesame Street, we have Ernie as a member of that group. If I add another user here, so for example, Elmo, okay, I print the file again, and we can see here that we have a comma separated value list of values with the different users. Okay, we can't. Okay, I've used something I want to tell you is that here I use the long version of the option, say append and groups. I can do the same using the sort option. So for example, this command will be equivalent for adding a user to a group. So for example, Bert here, we don't have Bert. Here, it will do the same. In most Unix commands, we have a long version and a short version. In this case, the short version, usually you have only a letter and you can put all the options here together. So this will be the option A or the option G. Okay, this is more readable. So for example, if you see that, it's easier to know what the command is doing than this, but this is more compact. And if you are you know the different options of that command, you need to write less characters with that. This you can use the man command. You can see the long options and the short option here. So for example, here this is the append option. This is the short and this is the long option. And here, for example, the other one here, the G and groups, the short and the long option. So you can see here, this is equivalent. This is short and long, and this is the short and long option. And it happens for most Unix commands, so it's very useful to know that. Other way of adding a user to a group, for example, I don't know. Okay, we have Ernie, Elmo, Bert. Okay. And another way of adding a user to a group is with add user. So add user. I can put here the user. In this case, I don't have Ernie, Elmo, Bert, Robert, and the name of the group. Okay, doing that, we have that user in the group. So these 4 users belong to the group Sesame Street. And to remove a user for the group, we can modify this file, or we can use del user Robert Elmo, for example, Street with sudo, and then I can see that this user doesn't belong to the group anymore. You can do that with user mode. I think you have user mode options for doing that, but it's easier to use the user. So groups are collections of users that we will use for giving permissions to the group, and that we can add or remove users from that group, and we have some commands for creating groups, adding users, and removing users for that groups.